Importantly for today's discussion, I was extremely honoured to be part of the group that Prime Minister Motley and the Deputy Secretary General gathered in Bridgetown in mid-2022. And I think we're all here because we agree with her assessment that the world has changed and the scale of the multiple crises we're facing is ever increasing. And we need to bring climate and development finance together. In the face of these demands, the global finance architecture is no longer fit for purpose, but needs to change, both in speed, in scale, and in fairness of representation. We've all come a long way since that first Bridgetown meeting, and finance reform has been at the heart of the international calendar since then, whether it's at the Paris Summit or at the exceptional Africa Climate Summit, through the hard work of India's G20 expert group, or indeed within the COP process under the Egyptian presidency and since. I'd also like to call out the work of the V20 finance ministers with their Accra Marrakesh agenda. Now, many of the key priorities with Bridgetown are moving forward, along with other actions such as establishing important country platforms and high integrity, emphasis on high integrity carbon financing. And these are all crystallized within the UAE Declaration of Leaders on a Global Climate Finance Framework. And in all this work, we've set the ambition, and there's consensus now about the direction of travel. We all agree that the MDBs and the IFIs need to be both better and bigger. Working across the system and with the private sector and civil society, we need to get finance to those who need it most, who often face huge impediments, not least of which is cost of capital. So it's time to talk about implementation, it's time to talk about practical steps, innovative partnerships, and we need to turn this ambition into action, which is indeed the theme of the COP. We're turning billions to trillions, and that's what we're talking about today. We've got an extraordinary lineup of speakers. We're going to be opened today by the UAE Minister of Finance. We also have the heads of the World Bank and the IMF, and many of the MDB presidents, all of whom will be talking in concise, I hope, but also very concrete terms about the action they're taking to move us forward. And it's my absolute pleasure to invite our opening speaker to the stage, His Excellency Mohammed Al Husseini, the UAE Minister of Finance.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor to open today's event, which is focused on making climate finance more available, accessible, and affordable to achieve our shared ambition of meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. The international climate finance architecture will need to be fit for purpose to deliver the climate finance we need at the right speed and scale. Fixing climate finance has been a key pillar of the COP28 presidency agenda since the beginning. In this regard, it remains imperative for us to maintain our momentum and build upon our achievements. Regardless of the complexity of the task and the scale of the financing required, each stride towards fixing climate finance will significantly contribute to our shared objective. Moreover, it is important to actively acknowledge our collective accomplishments and not solely focus on our shortcomings. On December 1st, we launched the Declaration of Leaders on a Global Climate Finance Framework. This was developed, championed, and endorsed by the leaders of India, France, Kenya, Barbados, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, Ghana, Senegal, and Colombia. The framework offers a set of principles for a climate finance architecture that can deliver for all. It brings together the reform agenda progressed by the Africa Climate Summit, the Paris Summit, the Bridgetown Agenda, the G20 Summit, and many others this year. This framework has three crucial elements. The first is rebuilding trust by delivering on past commitments. On this, we have seen a milestone agreement made at COP28 on the Loss and Damage Fund pledges over $720 million have already been made to support countries in dealing with the loss and damage, including $100 million from the UAE. We have also seen the largest ever replenishment of the Green Climate Fund with over $12 billion in pledges. The second is seizing the economic opportunity to climate action. The UAE's $4.5 billion initiative on clean energy in Africa, announced 3 months ago, has already deployed over half of this finance into projects in Africa to support green industrialization and country-owned investment plans for green growth. The third is delivering at scale. At COP28, the UAE has announced a $30 billion climate fund called Altera, the world's largest private investment vehicle for climate action, which aims to mobilize $250 billion globally by 2030, and I invite you all to partner with us in this fund. Additionally, I welcome the fact that MDBs have already delivered a record of nearly $100 billion in climate finance last year, of which more than $60 billion is to low and middle income countries. Moreover, I commend the significant progress MDBs have delivered on the implementation of the Capital Adequacy Framework recommendations. In the past few days at COP28, we have witnessed some good announcements from MDBs. The World Bank announced an increased climate finance target of 45% by 2025, with half to mitigation and half to adaptation, which means $9 billion additional per year in climate finance by 2025. The Inter-American Development Bank announced it will aim to triple its climate financing to $150 billion over the next decade, in line with the G20 MDB expert group recommendations. Many MDBs have announced they will offer climate-resilient debt clauses in their loans that pause a country's debt when it's hit by a natural disaster. On adaptation, I also welcome the announcement from the Islamic Development Bank to allocate over $1 billion in climate finance to countries affected by conflict and humanitarian crisis. These are just a few examples of the good initiatives that have been announced in the past few days by MDBs. Additionally, the IMF has made good progress on supporting climate resilience through the use of special drawing rights. The UAE is supporting the IMF's efforts through our pledge of $200 million to the RST Trust, as announced during COP. The multilateral climate funds have announced yesterday that they will work together to harmonize their standards to increase access to climate finance. These are all steps in the right direction and completely aligned with the principles of the Global Climate Finance Framework that we have launched with key world leaders. In the joint MDB statement released yesterday, MDBs have laid out a vision for better collaboration. MDBs have committed to work through country platforms, develop a common approach for reporting climate results, launched a long-term strategy facility to support countries, and launched common principles for tracking nature-positive finance. Finally, we have been calling to action in IFI's reform since the start of COP28 presidency, and I'm happy to see that this has created positive momentum and tangible action. I invite you all to work towards implementing the shared vision we have launched with the Global Climate Finance Framework, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the role you can play in making climate finance available, accessible, and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. And a huge congratulations to the COP team for securing an outcome on loss and damage on day one. I'd now like to invite the heads of the MDBs onto the stage. I think we have a photo opportunity. I hope you're all expecting that. Please do come to the stage. So before we move to the panel section, I'd like to welcome also the COP28 MDB joint statement, which we're celebrating here, that was announced this weekend, and once again sets out what the MDBs are doing to work together and raise ambition in the name of climate action. We'll be talking about that more in a moment. Please do. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Minister Mohammed Al-Husseini. Thank you to our MDB presidents. I'm now going to turn to our first panel, as our MDB presidents, some of them, leave the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina, you're staying put. Yes, indeed. We also have Dr. Adesina. I believe you're joining us for this panel. Please do join us. Thank you very much. We have the head of the Green Climate Fund, Mafalda Duarte. We have the president of AIIB, Jinli Kun. We have the president of EIB, Werner Hoyer. And last but not least, our high-level champion from COP27, Mahmoud Muhaidin. Where's Mahmoud? We're missing a couple, but that's okay. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage. Thank you. So our first panel is an opportunity to look across the MDB and IFI system, and we'll be asking the esteemed panelists where progress they think has been made over the last year and a half since Prime Minister Motley launched the Bridgetown Agenda. And of course, our panelists are going to be setting out their thinking on the much needed areas of action and implementation, including in the financial model of their institutions, but also crucially in the operating model, and in the good work that's underway on country platforms, already referenced by the Minister, and sectoral transition strategies. And of course, given that 3 billion people are now living in countries which are spending more on debt servicing than on health or education, we must tackle the issue of debt solutions and how we mobilize more concessional capital. And I'm pleased that we're about to do that with a panel that really does work on all of these elements of the system. There's a lot to get through, but I'm going to start with Kristalina Georgieva. I know you have to leave soon, but we're going to try and keep the panel to time. So much of the conversation in global finance focuses on the MDBs, but the IMF obviously has a unique role to play in terms of macroeconomic shocks. And given that these are increasingly going to be related to climate and nature shocks, can you tell us how you think the role of the IMF is going to evolve?
Very significant change in the role of the IMF. Today we are a systemically significant institution in the fight against climate change. Because climate shocks are macrocritical, they affect macroeconomic and financial stability, and the opportunity of the green transition is a pathway to green jobs and green growth. What it means for us at the IMF is that we now integrate climate considerations in our macro analysis, in our stress testing of the financial system, in the data work we do at the IMF, and of course in terms of financing. This is since we got a great start from our minister with specificity. Let me tell you, we have exceeded our target for the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. We are now over $41 billion. with the latest contribution from UAE as well included. We have delivered already in one short year 11 programs. 6 of these programs are in Africa. They're all done with speed. Average time, about 3, maximum 4 months. How we were so successful to move fast? Because of partnerships. We work with the World Bank, with the Inter-American Development Bank, with the African Development Bank, so we can identify what are the policy obstacles for countries to move faster to access climate finance. We are very keen to demonstrate that our ability to open up fiscal space for countries is used for structural transformation. First time in the history of the IMF, we provide long-term concessional financing, 20 years maturity, 10.5 years grace period, and we offer it to not only low-income countries at concessional terms, but also to vulnerable middle-income countries. Looking forward, we concentrate on 2 topics. First, domestic resource mobilization. We know that countries need to raise money domestically even more than internationally. So tax systems, quality of spending, local currency markets. Second, on building more systemic policy work on the key policy obstacles for moving faster on the green transition. The use of harmful subsidies. Fossil fuel subsidies were 1.3 trillion last year. The use of good subsidies, investing in R&D and investing in what the public sector can do to help the private sector move in. And also, we are very concentrated on building the power of partnerships. In every single opportunity, we work with others because together the whole is bigger than the sum of individual parts.
Thank you, Kristalina. And it was really great to hear you talking about longer timelines, which is something that we've heard again and again from countries that are struggling at the moment, and introducing the importance of policy change and having the right fiscal environment. I'm sure many of these things will come up. I'd like to turn to President Adesina now, who I know has been working on a number of key areas to crowd in private finance and raise additional resources through hybrid capital and support adaptation in fiscal policy as well. Can you share some of those? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I'm actually here very delighted at this COP, because the most important thing is really all about how you do climate adaptation. For us in Africa, that's the main issue, right? How to mobilize that has been at the core of it. So I'll talk about some of the things that we're really focusing on as we're here. So on that particular issue, we launched what's called the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which is a $25 billion initiative together with the Global Center on Adaptation. It is the largest climate adaptation program in the world. We as African Development Bank, we put today 67% or 64% of all of our financing into climate adaptation. So that's the first thing I want to say on that. The second thing I want to say is we were just coming from a meeting now with Mia Motley and all that on the debt clauses, pausing the debt issue. We are also launching at this particular COP what's called the Africa Climate Risk Insurance Facility for Adaptation, which is a $1 billion facility to insure countries against catastrophic risk events. So that's very, very much important if you're going to do sustainable development. And thirdly is how to support African countries to green their infrastructure. And so we launched also here what's called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, which is to mobilize $10 billion to help Africa to green up its space. But to your point on the issue of financial innovations that you're talking about, I welcome the G20 capital adequacy framework. We are responding to that. In fact, most of what they said, we've been responding to even before they said it. For example, the African Development Bank was the first multilateral development bank to do a synthetic securitization. We started that way back in 2016 for $1 billion. We got support from the UK government to do our second synthetic securitization for $2 billion, which freed up $2 billion of headroom for us to invest in climate-resilient infrastructure. And also, we are working on callable capital. Minister, you're here, and thank you for your support on that, because we need that callable capital. But in addition to that, we are also doing the hybrid capital, which is very, very critical for us to be able to leverage a lot more resources. And that's where I want to really end on that and compliment my sister, and commend and compliment my sister, Kristalina, on the SDRs, when she was talking about how we work together. You see, the multilateral development banks are leveraging machines, right? And because of our capital structure, we can take those SDRs. We came up with one with together, Ilan, it's here somewhere, yeah, hi, to see how we can actually take the SDRs and stretch them and multiply them so that we can complement the great work of IMF with the PRGT and the RST. And well done, Kristalina, for all the work there. That model now allows us, as multilateral development banks, to be able to leverage 3 to 4 times every single dollar of the SDR. I want to thank the IMF for really working closely with us on that. And I think, secondly, it also allows us to be able, it comes for the donors at zero cost, literally, because we pay for the cost of it to the IMF. And thirdly, and we are very, very comforted by this, Kristalina, is that your team assured us that it actually meets the reserve asset quality. So that's really the thing that you have to have for that. So, from Ilan and myself and all the other colleagues on the MDB, I can give you a high five on that. We can move on this. We hope that we have to concretize this before the IMF meetings in April. And if we do that without leverage, I think, Kristalina, we can probably even think of jiggling the SDR name. Maybe we might call it supporting development revitalization, and that's also SDR. So thank you very much, Kristalina. We appreciate that.
I don't think I've seen a high five on an MDB panel before. That's definitely an innovation at COP28. I was really pleased to hear you talk about debt pause clauses, President Adesina, and I can say, AJ in the front row, and thank you so much for putting debt pause clauses, not just in future, but considering also existing debt. It's such an important piece of liquidity support there. And again, you referenced partnerships, so I hope that's going to be an ongoing theme of this panel. And I'd now like to go to President Leachin of the AIIB, which has cemented itself as a vital part of the ecosystem. And your new climate action plan, I have to say, shows your role as a real innovator in areas like blended finance and debt market innovations. And we've heard about collaborations with GCA between MDBs and the IMF, and now you're also considering work with philanthropy, as I understand it as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to let you know, while at this moment I'm talking here, our staff are working on the ground in many countries who are our members. We need actions. We need to translate what we are committed here to reality, to the tangible results. Briefly, 2 points. One is the MDBs working as a system. And we have also contributed. Over the last couple of years, we have strengthened the cooperation. But I would say the joint commitment in Marrakesh is really a boost to the team-up spirit. We work as a team, and we support each other. We share the same objective, and we have the same vigor and vitality to do what we are required to do. With regard to what we've been doing in this bank, and as you know, we have the first climate action plan, which would guide the management and the staff in a way we ramp up our efforts to help our members to achieve climate objectives, particularly adaptation, mitigation, and overall environmental ecosystems improvement. And we have the corporate strategy, which stipulates that this bank would achieve 50%, at least 50% of the financings for climate change by 2025. 2022, we achieved 56%. And this year, again, we will go over 50%. By 2030, we would have 50% at least of the financing supporting private sector. So these two objectives would be overfulfilled ahead of the schedule. So all this indicates that we are not just talking, we are working. And this is a new bank. We are 8 years into operation. We are adequately capitalized, but we are actively participating in the capital adequacy framework discussions. In this regard, I would say that we are not going to solve simply the capital adequacy issue. We're trying to have the kind of reform which could help MDBs more sustainable in promoting sustainable development. So we go beyond simply the capital adequacy. And in this regard, I'd like to thank Kristalina for RNST, and we are working together in supporting Bangladesh. And more countries will benefit from that. So, and also we work with Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Asian Green Partnership Fund. This is also something, you know, we've been talking about mobilizing private sector resources, philanthropies, and I think this is a very, very good start. So let me share with you my basic fundamental thinking that only by working together could MDBs leverage their limited resources to have a big impact. Our bank's basic principle is to be lean, clean, and green. We must use the capital which comes from taxpayers' money most effectively. And our bank's name is Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So it's AIIB. But we are also having creative ideas. So far, from now on, I will say AI, a little bit paused, IB. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're a bit short on time, which often happens at these summits. So I would just note that the next three speakers, and I apologise, the most patient usually get their time cut, which is a great unfairness in this world. But if you could keep your comments to a little bit shorter so that we can finish on time, I'd be extremely grateful. And Mafalda, we've seen unprecedented collaboration, a lot to do with your leadership between the different multilateral climate funds. And can you tell us what your vision is and about your joint statement and the role of GCF now that you've taken over? Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. It is really great to see the momentum on the reform of the finance architecture, much critical, because as even we came to this COP, the science is telling us that the window of action is narrowing if we are to meet 1.5. And so the examples that His Excellency Minister of Finance of UAE articulated are just the latest of the great results that we are accomplishing in that area. Much like what we heard this morning or earlier today about the multilateral development banks, we are trying the same thing across the major climate funds, trying to see how we can work better as a system and be enablers of really greater ambition. So yesterday, much like the MDBs as well, we also issued a statement, a joint statement, and we commit ourselves mid-next year, so very short time frame, to come up with a position on how do we see complementarity across the funds. What is it that each of our institutions is best positioned to deliver? And also a concrete proposal to our boards on how we are going to align and simplify access, because this is really what countries are asking for. But in addition, we hope to continue to engage with the multilateral development banks, because we want to be, as I said, we are enablers of others. That's our role, is to be enablers of others. So we are very keen to engage in understanding as the discussions on the MDB reform agenda progress, how can we be enablers of that reform and ambition of the MDBs? Of course, some of us have a very clear task, like the Green Climate Fund, to mobilize private capital. Just right here at COP, we announced several initiatives, one of which is first guarantee company to really guarantee climate bond issuances and loans. Another one, also a first financial institution dedicated to subnational borrowing, to mobilize capital through different ways, and others. We announced initiatives with equity funds to reach the hardest to reach in Africa in terms of energy access. So, and our commitment is to double down on those initiatives. Let me stop here.
Thank you so much. And what a joy it is to hear the reference to subnationals and the hardest to reach communities. I think this has been a real gap in our finance discussion, and it's a difficult issue, I know, for MDBs, but this subnational, getting close to the communities is absolutely crucial. So thank you very much for those remarks. President Hoyer, you consider yourself Europe's Green Bank, and as an MDB, you've ended your support for fossil fuel projects, including gas, and have committed 50% of your lending to go to climate by 2025. And I heard also you want to mobilise €1 trillion in climate financing by the end of the decade. How is it going? Please tell us.
I hope it works. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. I mean, we have been in Sharm el-Sheikh last year. We have been in Washington, in Marrakesh. We have had the big event in Paris. Have we made progress? Look at what's written up on the ceiling. Unite, act, deliver. Have we delivered? I think the patience of the people around ourselves is running out when it comes to the MDB community. We must now deliver. We must go into delivery mode. I think we should not send the wrong signals from this COP. No reduction in the ambition when it comes to our climate objectives. As far as EIB is concerned, you mentioned that we opened our new gateway in 2019, and on all the objectives you have mentioned, we are well on track. But this is not enough, because we need to do this in closest cooperation with the other MDBs and, by the way, also national agencies. I think we can deliver, but we must get serious. In 2022 alone, we supported Climate Action Project with almost €37 billion, and the economic case for many climate action projects has been strong. Just look at the surge of renewable energies around the world. There is no trade-off between climate action and development, and we must stop putting climate action, development and innovation into three different boxes. These three belong always together if we want to be successful. Our focus is on concrete and tangible projects. Several are announced during the COP. Climate change affects every region on this planet, and never before has the urgency to transition to be more sustainable, to more sustainable economies been greater. We must not leave any doubt that we do not reduce our ambition, and I'm afraid that sometimes relativation messages are coming from this COP, and that would be detrimental. We are announcing a new approach to support a just transition and just resilience worldwide, because we need to see that this ambitious transition can only work if it is organized in a fair way. We must organize a just transition. We have made that experience within the European Union when we announced that we move out of unabated fossil fuels immediately in 2019. We had member states of the European Union who got into the real trouble because of this. And this is why I had to tell one prime minister, said, the last miner who is going to leave the coal mine in your country, he's not going to be the head of the digital startup in 2 weeks. We must support this transition in order to make it a just and fair transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for raising the issue of just transition, which applies domestically but also internationally. And I'm now going to turn to Mahmoud, who can give us his sense. I think you've been in these discussions for a long time now. We'd really like to hear your reflections, and you can be as challenging as you like to end this first panel, on what you've seen in terms of progress between these two COPs, and what would you like to see arise from the global stocktake and all of the things that are being discussed here?
And all of that in less than 2 minutes. Yeah, thank you. Well, time is our enemy, not just for sessions, but basically in what we are after.